Welcome to the Energetic Psyche, a weekly podcast hosted by yours truly, Dr. Adrienne Campbell. This week for episode 39, I have Dr. Cacky Mellor joining me to explore the concept of Numinosity, the Anima Mundi, and how we can create an intentional and meaningful relationship with the living world around us. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoy. So welcome to the Energetic Psyche, a weekly podcast hosted by yours truly, Dr. Adrienne Campbell, where we talk about real life, challenge assumptions, and explore different ways of being in the world. So for this week, episode 39, I have Dr. Cacky Mellor joining me once again, because we're lucky, to explore the concept of Numinosity, the Anima Mundi, and how we can create an intentional and meaningful relationship with the living world around us. And just as a reminder, a little bit about Dr. Cacky. So she's a visiting assistant professor at Lesley University's Mental Health and Wellbeing Department and has a remote somatic private practice, Somatic Reclamation. If you want to know more about that, watch the last one that we did. We talked all about her practice and her education. In this practice, she works with individuals, helping them get more clear in their lives and process different difficulties. She's spent the past 15 years studying the power of words on the body, mind, soul, and community. And to connect with her, her website is cackymellor.com. So, Cacky, once again, thank you so much for joining me. It's always a joy to have you on the show, and I appreciate your presence so much.
Oh, it is such a joy to be back and to be talking about one of my very favorite topics with you, following the call of the numinous.
I just love the word. By the way, my car is named after that word. I don't think I told you.
No, I had no idea.
Yeah, her name is Numi. I was driving and I think I was listening to a book by Thomas More, like on Audible. And he was talking about the numinous and luminosa. Is that how you say the Latin version? Yeah. And he said, the way he said the word, I was like, ooh. And I was like, is that you? Is that you, Numi? Because I was driving, right? Aww. And I hadn't named her yet. And so that's how she got her name.
I love that. That's so synchronistic.
Right. Yeah. And it's just because I have a thing with not just like the meanings of words, but the sounds of words. And numinous is just, I think, sounds beautiful. It's just, it holds so much weight in it.
Yeah. I so resonate with that because it is such a musical and lyrical sounding word. And it feels so appropriate for the concept of the numinous that we're going to explore together today.
Yes. Yeah. So what does numinous mean, Dr. Cacky?
So the numinous, it's a concept that goes by many, many, many different names in different traditions. The way that I understand numinosity or the numinous is the connection to that which is greater than ourselves. Some folks call it the divine. Some folks call it soul or spirit. In the Chinese medicine tradition, it might be called qi. In other traditions, it might be called ki, or in Ayurveda, it might be called prana. From the way that I experience it, it's all trying to get to this quality of life force energy that permeates all things, that's constantly moving in and around us, that often we feel, but it's hard to put words to. And so the numinous is such a sing-songy way of trying to point towards that experience.
Yes. I'm like, one of the things that I always think of when I think of numinous is that it's elusive.
Yes.
Or inexpressible. Well, at least I'd say defining the definition of it is elusive, because it's literally like the definition of an inexpressible, intangible experience, right? Like Like those moments, like when I was getting ready for tonight, I was thinking about like, what is the numinous? What is the experience of the numinous, right? Because it's like that like we're like, but it is. So it's those moments where you're in awe, like when you're awestruck.
Yes.
Right. And it's almost like so overwhelming to your senses, because it's all of it, right? Like when we experience numinosity, I think, the more traditional old school ways of talking about it include like the divine, religious type stuff. But I think divinity can be seen outside of religion and even outside of spirituality, maybe. But it's those moments, like you said, when it's something bigger than ourselves, where you're almost like in pause.
Yeah.
Or like, I think about those images from movies where like it slows down to slow motion and there's like a sprinkler, right? And like kids are running slow motion and people are laughing. And then there's like this like profound like moment. Yeah. And that's what I think of like when I think of the numinous.
Yeah. And that sense of childlike wonder is so key. Like I have goosebumps.
Me too.
Feeling into that, because it is such a palpable experience that you can't really comprehend it with your rational mind or your logical mind. It's plugging into this bigger picture. It's simultaneously very humbling, because I recognize how small I am in those moments, and very transpersonal, where it's almost like I'm able to see the bigger picture for a fleeting moment. And this is like the concept of the numinous is what poets have been trying to convey to us since time immemorial, of capturing and putting in words this experience that is so impermanent and fleeting, and yet always available to us.
Right. And it's interesting that you mentioned poets, because so like I've written some poetry, right? I would consider myself a bit of an artist, at least artist. I have an artist heart. And I'm the look at the sky kind of girl, and I see like, I don't know, just walking on the sidewalk, sometimes I'll notice something, the way the light hits like the water that's like dripping off the leaf in a certain way. And there's just this profound beauty to that, that like not everyone sees, but I think those who are more poetic, are more drawn to those moments. I had a client many, many years ago who was an artist in Laguna Beach, California. And after a Reiki session one night, she is a little bit older than me, probably a couple decades older. She grabbed my wrist and I was like, and I looked at her and she's like, "You're different like I am." She's like, you see those things in the sky, and you see the angles and the colors that not everybody sees when they're rushing about with their life, huh? And I was like, yes. I'll never forget it. Like we just had this moment. And I think, like there are people that I think the numinous is just more present for. I'm not sure why. But I think poets, the artists are one of them. Maybe it's because they have more access to the unconscious. I don't know. Okay, I'm going analytical brain pause. But yeah.
I love that so much. And I think that tuning into the numinous and cultivating our relationship with it is something that we can strengthen and we can create greater access to. It does take practice and slowing down, which is
there has to be an intentionality to it.
Yeah. Because you were describing that moment of like seeing the water dripping off the leaf, and it transported me to like walking through a forest and the light coming through the canopy of the trees. And that to me is like, like that's the stained glass, like the cathedral of being in nature, and just getting to witness the play of light and the energy that's being transformed through those leaves and through the trees and through the roots and the mycelial network. And it's just, it's so awe-inspiring, and it takes my breath away.
I know. It's just magical.
Yeah, magical.
Just
perfect word.
Magical. You know, it's like the sparkles of life.
Yeah.
But in like a deep, meaningful way. Yeah. not a throwaway confetti kind of way. Yeah.
Yeah. Where it is, you know, I'm a big student of Thich Nhat Hanh and mindfulness. And there's something about his practices that always feel very deeply connected to this cultivation of our access to the numinous, and to recognizing the incredible magic in every moment, in everything that's unfolding around us. Like really pausing to think about how the entire access of the world is moving in relationship to me taking a sip of this drink. And it's not about me being the center of the world. And the only way for me to experience this world is as me as the center. So it has this like deeply interpersonal element, and what Thich Nhat Hanh would call interbeing, that we inter-are with all things, all humans, all non-humans, all living things, all what we perceive as non-living things in Western society. And so often we're moving so quickly in our day-to-day that we don't recognize how deeply in relationship we are with everything around us, and how much there can be a shift in our experience if we are coming from that place.
Yeah. Yeah. And like when I teach Reiki, we talk about it from that perspective, from the perspective of energy, right? And how we are all connected because everything contains energy, including this pen, which is an inanimate object, but it still holds energy. And I was just thinking about like how we're drawn to certain objects, drawn to certain places, drawn to certain people. There are things that are offensive to us, and we don't understand why. Right. But there might be some, like those of us, I think, that are more open to the numinous are the ones that are like, oh, that rock wants to come home with me.
Yeah.
But then there's the people who are less aware, right? But still impacted and still affected when they pick something out. It's not just because of exactly what it looks like and this, that, and the other, but there is a draw of energy. And I think about like super surface basic, but like Marie Kondo's, like if it doesn't bring you joy, get rid of it. You might have something in your house that like actually is useful and does a thing and but every time you touch it, it gives you a bad vibe or it reminds you of something terrible that happened or, you know, whatever. So you got to get rid of it, you know, and like all of that is energy. All of that is that interconnection that we have with all things, all beings. And yeah, like you said, with the newness, it's that bigger thing. It's the connection of all of us.
Yeah.
Right. And when we have a numinous experience, we're having like a moment of awareness, I think, of that.
Yes.
And I almost wonder if like we can only have these glimpses and moments because we just couldn't handle we couldn't handle it. Like when you've seen like, you know, in the books and the movies where people can't look at the divine because it will destroy them, you know, because it's just too much for us to be able to conceive, you know?
Yeah, no, I think that's probably spot on, that we can only get glimpses and we can create more access to those glimpses and to that awareness. And it's not a place that humans can function at all the time in our current society, the way our society is built.
Right. Because the reason we have trouble slowing down is because we have to go so fast.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Like if I'm walking and it's because I have to get somewhere by a certain time and I only have 3 minutes, I'm not going to see that leaf with the water dripping down and blah, 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 blah. Right. I'm going to walk right past it and not even notice it because I'm so focused on what's coming next instead of being present, which is very much not the society that we're living in at the moment. Yeah. So I'm going to get really practical here and say, so what's the point of paying more attention to the numinous, to wanting to have more or having more numinous experiences in your life?
I love that question.
And I have an answer too. So don't worry. I'm not just like lobbing it out. I'm like, go, Cacky. But I want to hear what you have to say first.
Yeah. I don't know if there's a universal answer, but I can certainly speak to my answer to that question. Why is it important for me to develop this practice? And it has really been transformational for me on a multitude of levels. Thinking about, not just thinking, but experiencing my place in this greater unfolding has been deeply humbling. It's helped me and continues to help me put my own experiences in perspective. Not that my personal problems aren't important. And there's a lot happening in the world. And I get to be a part of that. Like I get to be a part of, this is a little bit of personifying nature, but I get to be a part of the joy of the leaves getting to receive that sunlight. I get to witness that. And that provides a deeper sense of meaning. Meaning for me. And it also is a huge relief that this life is so much bigger than me. And yes, I get to be a contributor in this. And it's not all about me, and it's not all on me to figure everything out. Only what's within my control, which is very little, is my responsibility to show up and do.
Yeah. Awesome. Absolutely. I concur with all of those things. and I would say for me, like, so one of my favorite quotes ever, I've almost had it tattooed on me a bunch of times, but I want to get it on my wrist. And I've always been in jobs where that's like maybe you don't do that. So I've paused. But anyways, the quote is, poetry heals the wounds inflicted by reason.
I love that.
I've loved it. I mean, since I was a little girl, like I've loved this quote forever. It's by novelists. And so for me, the numinous helps me experience the beauty of this world.
Yes.
Right? Like having those numinous experiences, seeing the numinosity, experiencing the numinosity, like it allows me to see past the black and white, I almost want to say like dirtiness of the world. It's like Wizard of Oz when it goes black and white to color, right?
Yeah,
like,
I love it. Yeah.
It's very much how I see like our day-to-day, the trudging through, like life is hard. Like life is really challenging, you know, and we can say, oh, it's more or less for different people, but I'll tell you, everyone has their challenges and it's all subjective. Life is difficult. And I think having access to the numinous, allowing yourself to see magical things, just lightens the load a little bit for a lot of the reasons that you shared, right? But then also I feel beauty for me, especially. I'm a very big on visual aesthetics or just aesthetics in general. I think it just makes everything a little bit softer, a little bit gentler, a little bit more enjoyable. And then recognizing that interconnection, knowing we're not alone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we're not all aware of how connected we are consciously, but I think in those moments of numinosity, there's a knowing, like a profound knowing in our soul that we are all connected in one. And so the feeling of aloneness or loneliness, I think, can be, I don't know, held is the word that's coming forward for me. So I'll just use that, right? Yeah, so I've always found that like it makes life a little bit easier to deal with. You can find something beautiful. You can find something to smile at or to giggle at. Because numinosity doesn't always have to be serious either.
Oh no, not at all. Yeah.
You know, we're talking about these big, beautiful things, but like there's also like when I was in Hawaii doing Reiki, whenever I do Reiki out there, oh my gosh. I mean, I'm doing it at my friend Donna May's, which is next to this gulch in a jungle that has like heavy mana, like big spirit energy. They used to do burials there. So there's lots and lots of spirits. And every time I do Reiki there, oh my gosh, the room is full of spirits, like guides, etc. But more than once now, the Manahuni have showed up, which are like these little spirit people of Hawaii, right? And the first time I saw them, I didn't even know what they were. So I couldn't have made it up because I literally had no idea what they were. But as I was doing energy work, I saw them and they're like giggling and poking each other and laughing. And I was like, what the heck is going on? You know, and I like described them afterwards. And Tana May was like, oh my gosh, those are the Manahuni. I'm like, what is that? And she's like, get Google, look it up. I was like, yeah, but like the numinous, just like, you know, anything magical, fairies. I mean, think of all of the fun stuff, you know, that we can add to life through that lens. And, you know, I think so much of our folklore, fairy tales, etc., are viewports kind of for that, a way for us to access the numinous through image and art.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Mythology, folklore, 100%. Our dreams.
Oh, I mean,
yes.
Like, I'm like, the first thing that comes to mind is like spirit and visitation dreams. Like those, I've had only honestly a couple, like a handful of like real true visitation dreams where I know for sure something came to my dream. But it is very much like waking up and just being like, what just happened? there's that awe-struck moment.
Yeah. And oh my gosh, that reminds me two things that I want to touch on. One, I've had the privilege, the blessing of several times being gifted with dreams from the land that I was sleeping on, where it wasn't, I could tell it wasn't my dream. It was almost like witnessing like a memory. And then waking up and having no knowledge of what was happening on this land before I got there. And on several occasions, then going to a host or someone that was local and telling them the dream, and their jaw just hitting the floor and being like, that literally happened here last year. Like, how did you know that?
Wow.
That happened? And I was like, I didn't. Like, the land told me, which, yeah, that kind of ties into Anima Mundi, which I do want to talk about. And before going there, as part of transitioning there, this awareness and practice of touching into the numinous has also opened up an opportunity for me to take responsibility for my relationship with my environment.
Oh, yeah, completely.
Rather than seeing it as like a one directional experience where, yeah, I'm sitting on this chair. This chair is an inanimate object, quote, for the folks who are listening at home. It's an opportunity to see that there is life force in this chair. There's life force in this computer. There's life force in the stones on the path. There's life force in the trees and in the animals and other people. And in our culture, sometimes it's harder for people to access that those are multi-directional relationships rather than I am the actor acting upon this object. But that this quote unquote object has its own lived experience. It's having an experience. Right. And I get to come into relationship with that. And how do I want to do that in a meaningful way?
Yeah. So you're 100% right. This ties into Anima Mundi perfect, because it's through the way that we see the world around us, the way we experience the world around us, which is like these numinous experience, that we start to see the connection between all of us, right? And I say all of us. And then Anima Mundi, so we'll just say it's the Latin for the soul of the world, yes. Right? Yeah. And so when we connect with the world at this energetic numinous level, you're connecting with the soul of the world. And when you connect with the soul of the world, it's really hard not to be in relationship, right? And I think that's the big difference, is like seeing something, judging it, labeling it, defining it, versus being in relationship with it, right? Like, this is the pen, here it is, and it's silver and it's gray and it writes in black ink. That's right. That's what it is. That's what it does for me. If I want to be in relationship with this pen, I love this pen. I actually really do love this pen. And the grip is so comfortable. It's my favorite pen. Like, when I don't have it, I am kind of sad, and I miss this pen, right? This specific pen. It's been with me through many jobs, actually, and this pen matters to me. So I'm in relationship with it. But then taking it bigger, like you said, our relationship with our environment, the house that we live in, the community that we live in, the world that we live in, saving the environment is saving us. Taking care of our community is taking care of us, right? Us.
Yeah. Not just all of us. Yeah. Not just me, not just humans.
Right.
Not just animals, but all of this great ecological community that we have been birthed into.
Or created. Because even certain architecture, like I just got back from Europe, and there was buildings. Oh my God, do they have soul, right? The building I stayed at in Florence was built, was it 1592? Wow. I think 1592 or 1502. Either way, super freaking old.
And you've seen a lot.
And oh my gosh, right? And still alive and still breathing, still moving. The heart of that building's still beating. Yeah. So I think all of these things, that is the soul of our world that we're experiencing.
Yeah. And that we are a part of. Like, we are not separate from that soul. We are a way that soul is experiencing itself, which is always like such a mind-blowing moment for me of, again, tapping into that which is so much bigger than any one of us individually. And not just am I a aspect of Anima Mundi, aspect of the soul of the world seeing itself, but so is every single being that I interact with. And that is another piece of this practice that I have been tending to in order to deepen my compassion and forgiveness, particularly if there's a rupture or a challenge between me and a person, place, or thing, to recognize, like, no, they are also a part of the soul of this world, and we are equals in the eyes of Anima Mundi.
So you've alluded to this practice a few times. So I'd love for you to share about this practice, because I think sometimes, as we were just now talking, especially my left brain, the brain of mine that lived in the military and the nuclear industry and all that for so long, is like, are you guys high? Like, there's definitely this little part of me that's like, do you hear the way you're talking right now? Like, and then we were like this and the souls and like blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, no, I know. I get it. But no, not at the moment high. And all of this stuff does make sense. It's just not linear. And I think like for anyone listening or anyone that has more of like that predilection, like, it's just not linear. It doesn't mean it doesn't make sense. It doesn't mean it's like hokey pokey, whatever. This is big stuff. It's super meaningful. It really, really matters. The thing is it's difficult to talk about in our language because our language is not designed to discuss this type of thing. Other languages actually have like words that are concepts. Like German, I know, has a few that are like that. And so when we try to talk about it in English, we do get very but that's why I love like what you're doing, because you're putting it into practice. It's not just a concept. It's not just something we talk about like, oh, this is so great, we should do it. But you're actually putting, well, you know, the tires are hitting the road. So tell us all about your practice and how you are making this type of work more practical.
So
or accessible, I think that's the better word.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. My introduction to intentionally coming into a relationship with the numinous and with Anima Mundi started on day one of my coursework at Pacifica Graduate Institute. I think the course was like Intro to Depth Psychology. So this was with Dr. Joe Coppin. Mm-hmm. And we spent a good portion of the day, because our classes were all day, talking about this concept of Anima Mundi and the numinous and different cultural perspectives on this. And he introduced us to a practice called noticia, which is Latin for noticing. And he invited us to tune into all of our senses. So mind, body, spirit, what we can see, what we can hear, what we can taste, what we can smell, what we can touch, what we can feel, all of it. And to cross the threshold out of the classroom and notice the subtle draw, the subtle call of different aspects of the campus outside. And to follow that call, that it didn't, like, to suspend logical reason and trying to make sense of it, but just to notice where our attention was going and to follow that, whether it's where our feet were going, where we were naturally walking, or if we're just noticing a glimmer of the wind chimes in the tree or whatever it is, but to follow that and to track what that experience was like for us. And we did that for, I want to say, over an hour.
It was, when you first brought this up, I was like, I don't really remember doing this when I went through that class. But then as you went, I remember my journey. Like, not, I mean, this was a long time ago. I don't remember it exactly, but like, I remember leaving the room. Yeah. And it was a long time.
Yeah. It might even have been 2 hours. Like, it was a long time. This was our very first class, first day ever on campus at Pacifica. And he's like, go outside and listen to Anima Mundi and see what happens, basically. And then
we were just to make it clear, this wasn't a meditation or anything. No. This was literally like our bodies. We walked out of the room and we just followed our fancy. Like we were just like, ooh, you know, like you always, I don't know, like I always wish I had more time to do, but yes.
Yeah. I think he asked us not to talk to each other. So to do it in silence as much as possible. But yeah, that we had to go out, listen with full being listening, and then come back and be prepared to share out to the class what we wanted to share about that journey. And I had such a profoundly emotional experience where I walked all over the campus, and I ended up at this one Bodhisattva Kuan Yin statue.
I know exactly when you're talking about. Yep.
Yes, it's a special spot for many folks who've been to Pacifica campus for a reason. It has a lot of energy. And more so than the statue, what I was being called to was all of the offerings at her feet. Because there's been a practice for a very long time of making offerings to this particular statue. And there were all of these pine cones, and there was jewelry, I think there was even money, there were stones, there was all of these dried dead leaves. And I was like, why would someone put these dead leaves here? Like, I was really upset about it. And I just tried to let that go and stay with what was happening. And I ended up dropping to my knees and just sobbing, because one of the prompts that Dr. Coppin had offered earlier in the day was, what failure brought you to Pacifica, to your first day?
Wow.
That was just like thundering, echoing in my head, in my entire being. I was like, failure. Because like many humans, I've experienced a lot of failure. And I had gone into my first day of my doctoral program, like on this high of like, I made it, I'm here, I'm going to do this thing. So then to be confronted with all of these failures that were still part of my experience, they didn't go away just because I got an acceptance letter into this program that I've always wanted to be a part of. And I just wept in a way that I hadn't ever wept for all of those failures. And in that, I got this knowing that came not from me, but from these leaves, from these offerings of that my failures have been offerings to my growth.
Oh, I love that.
And just like, you know, it's fall here in New England, just like when the trees shed their leaves in fall, they go down to the earth and they fertilize the soil. Yes. And then that energy gets transformed and feeds the tree for the next season's leaves to grow. And so I'm getting goosebumps even now thinking about it, because I felt that process unfolding in myself with recognizing those failures as offerings towards my growth. And it was hard to close the practice and come back to class because it was such a profound shift. Like, it felt like on a cellular level for how I was defining myself.
Yeah.
And then I came back to class and we were going around and sharing. And I was just like, first day of class, bawling my eyes out, telling everyone about this. And
this is why we're friends.
Since that experience, I've had such a deep call to continue that practice. And I have adapted a version of that now I teach in my holistic approach to healing class at Lesley, where we talk about the numinous, we talk about Anima Mundi, we talk about our relationship to the environment. And then I walk them through some very particular guidelines, parameters for how to engage in the practice. And then they have to go out into the world and have their own experience following the call of the numinous. And then they come back and they write about it.
That's awesome. That is awesome. See, and I love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, by the way. Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. And I think that's one of the gifts of Pacifica is those experiences.
Yeah.
That, like, when people were like, oh, what is it like to go to school at Pacifica? And I'm like, it's like nothing I could have possibly imagined in 100 million years, especially coming from my background. And even then, like, there's books I'll see and I'm like, oh yeah, that was one of our textbooks. And people are like, what? I'm like, yes, we explore. But I think it's beautiful that we get those experiences because you do learn and grow so much from that. And I think it's lovely that you've taken that into your own class. Like, they're so lucky to have you to give them that. Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. And you've also taken it in other directions, right? Because I know you mentioned you have a couple speaking engagements coming up, and I feel like I'm going to say this wrong, but like, you're not creating a methodology around it, but you're building something, creating something.
Yeah. I mean, I have had such a transformational experience that I feel like this needs to be shared. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I brought it into my class. And I've been doing it with my classes for, I think this is my 8th class at Lesley, where we're going to be doing it. Something like that, 7 or 8 maybe. And through that process, it's been so incredible to witness the students' experience of it and for them to have their own profound experiences. And I'm actually working and collaborating with quite a few of my students that have done this practice that have chosen to be contributing authors in a paper about this whole experience for them, and drawing out trying to provide some language around what this experience is like from a variety of perspectives. Mm-hmm. And it's never fails to be amazing to get to see all of the different directions that folks take it and what their experiences are. And many of them have had their own profound and transformational experiences. So that has inspired me to continue to offer this to more people. Like, I love sharing it with my university classes, and this practice should not be reserved for folks who have the privilege of going to higher ed, whether that's the doctoral level at Pacifica or at undergrad. And so I've been excited to find new ways of inviting folks into this practice. And one of those is the upcoming Expressive Therapy Symposium that Endicott College is hosting on Friday, October 25th. Nice. And the whole theme of the conference is nature and ecology. And there's quite a few incredible, like the whole lineup's incredible of speakers and practices and opportunities to engage through the expressive arts in cultivating a deeper, more intentional relationship with our environment. Mm-hmm. And the organizer is Dr. Crystal Domain, who is a former professor of mine and a dear friend. And she invited me to host the afternoon experiential, and it's intended to be integrative practice, kind of integrating the whole day. And I was like, I have a couple of ideas, but this is the one I'm most excited about. What do you think? Can we do this? And she was so thrilled. And so I'm absolutely beyond excited to get to offer a version of this following the call of the Numinous practice to the conference on the 25th.
I am very excited to see how you do that. Because I think one of the beautiful things about like our experience you're sharing with your students is the container, right? Mm-hmm. And so if I'm like, you know, just on my own and I wanted to go do this, mm-hmm. like, I mean, okay, in my head, this is what I would like if somebody was like, I want to do this, this is what I think I would tell them. And then I want you to like shore it up in any way it needs. Yeah. But you could essentially do this in just your backyard, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like I have a teeny little, and my yard's small, too small in my opinion, but whatever, it's small. But it's not about the space. It's not about, you know, how far or wide you have to travel. It's really about just allowing yourself to be in the space. So like setting a timer on your watch or your phone, as long as you put it on silent otherwise. And then just like walking around in a space and just going with whatever calls you until that timer goes off, right?
Yeah. This doesn't have to be something that you have to go off to a special location and do. I've had students do this coming out of the subway and following the direction that the wind blows their hair.
Oh my God, that's cool.
For an hour and just going wherever that happens. Yeah. And I've had other students literally sit on their porch step and really notice the moon for an hour.
Wow, man.
It's
about seeing what you see, right?
Yes.
Noticing what you notice.
And what's speaking to you, right? Because it's going to be different, even if we're all in the same location. Like I was the only one who was at the foot of Kuan Yin that day, and there were 30 students in my class or something. There's a lot of us. Right. But I was the only one who got that particular call from that statue. Folks were all over the campus. Mm-hmm. And so it's not a prescriptive process. It's what are you listening to and what is speaking to you?
Because it all goes back to the relationships, yes. Right? Like, just like, you know, you and I could both have a similar friend, but we're going to talk about different things. Yep. We're going to experience that person differently, just like they're going to experience us differently because of the relationship we have with them. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing when we think about this numinous exploration of Anima Mundi.
Yeah.
Right? We're moving out into the world with the intention of connecting to the soul through a numinous like lens, right? Yeah. And so it's almost like we're chasing down our relationships, like pulling on the relational line that's getting a tug from something that wants to say hi, you know?
Yeah. And being open to hearing that hi.
Mm-hmm.
Because right. Or whatever message it is that they're trying to convey to you, because chances are they might have been trying to contact you for a while, and you might not have been open to receiving that message or having that be a true back and forth relationship, if that makes sense.
Yeah. This story keeps coming up in my head, and I'm like, fine, I'm just going to tell it. So I don't know if they were a student or a client. I'll be honest. I can't remember, maybe both, but it was a conversation I had so many years ago. I mean, probably 10 or so years ago. And we were talking about spirit guides, and we were talking about crystals having personalities and all that fun, magical stuff. Right. And they were a little more left-brained in the world, and this was all kind of new. And they were like, Adrian, like, cut the shit. Like, is any of this stuff real? Like, they were very direct. They were like, I mean, this is all cool and it's all fun and everything, but like, is any of this stuff real? Like, when I hear this crystal talk to me, like, I mean, I'm just making this up. Right. And I like took a second with it, because I think sometimes for people that this isn't natural for them.
Yeah.
Right. Like, because it wasn't for me until I started doing Reiki. And Reiki just like removed all these barriers that culture and my family and whoever else had put in place, apparently, because all of a sudden I was like, I'm talking to rocks and I don't care. Right. But before that, I was not okay with it. So for people who are coming from that place, it can feel a little hokey, right? And so I think that's why the story kept coming. And what I told them was, if it's important to you, if it changes the way you move through the world, if it makes your life better, what does it matter? And they were like, huh. And I said, like, who cares? You know, like, if we want to talk to rocks, if I want to talk to my pen and be like, oh, pen, I love you, which I do. You should hear me cook. It's kind of ridiculous. I talk to all of my ingredients, my food, my pans, everything. Whether I'm making up the relationship or not, which I fully don't believe that. I really do honestly honor the relationship I have with all of the energy and all of these items, right? But even if it wasn't real, whatever that word means, even if it wasn't real, if it makes my life better, why would I not do that? And I think that's also important. If you're struggling to understand this, but you are close to someone that is in that space, don't take that away from them. If it makes their life better, leave them alone. Let them be happy with their magic. Let them be happy with their talking rocks and their art and their poetry and all of that fun stuff. Let them skip in the grocery store, you know? Like, I think if we allowed ourselves more of those freedoms, if we allowed ourselves to listen to that call, to respond to it more often, versus, nope, I'm a grown up, I'm an adult, and not silly, right?
Yeah.
And realize that it's not silly. Like, these practices are actually quite serious and meaningful, you know?
Yeah.
I think we would all have a easier.
Oh, I don't know if you've frozen or if I have, but in case I'm still live, I so love that you're sharing that. And it's another layer of relationship where you get to be in relationship with someone who has the practice, for example, and honor their experience as much as your own. Because again, you're rather than imposing your experience, you're getting to honor yours and theirs. Yeah. I'm not sure if you're back or not. I want to just also mention another upcoming opportunity to connect if folks are interested. I am going to be speaking at the Somatic Experiencing International 30th anniversary conference on November 7th, 8th, the first Friday in November. And I'm going to be presenting with one of my, oh, there you are. Hi.
I'm back. I don't know what happened. Things just, they spun out.
No worries. You kept saying live, so I kept talking.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
Okay. I'm glad you're back.
Nice.
Yeah. I'm glad you're back. And I was just sharing about the Somatic Experiencing International 30th Anniversary Conference as another opportunity to connect for folks who are interested. It's a virtual conference, 2-day conference, and it's going to cover all different types of perspectives and topics within the umbrella of somatic experiencing. There's many different practitioners and leaders in the field that are going to be sharing their work. And I'm very excited to be included with one of my dear friends. We'll be co-presenting, Emanuela Feliciano. And we're going to be talking about a somatic approach to teaching and learning in classrooms.
Oh my gosh. I have to look this up. When is it? When is the date?
It's the first Friday in November. So I want to say, oh no, I guess it's the second one. Excuse me. So it's the 8th.
Okay. All right. Well, I will post it with this recording, the links to everything for everybody. So make sure and get that to me. But that's awesome. Yeah. And if anyone listening or watching is interested in this kind of stuff, really the best way to do it is go to more of these types of events. Yeah. You're going to find more resource, like books and everything are great. Like, don't get me wrong, but it's the conversations and the experientials that, in my opinion, have been more meaningful for me than the reading of the books.
Yeah. And being able to do it in community, even though you're having your own personal experience, being a part of a group that is doing this practice also amplifies the access to the numinous.
Well, and I think there's something validating about it too. You know, kind of like what I was talking about before the internet went crazy on me. Sometimes it can be hard to like connect to this in the beginning, but when everyone else around you is doing it too, it's a supportive communal vibe.
Yeah.
And it, I think, allows you to move more deeply and freely into that space.
Yeah. And to get to play.
Yes. Because it's not silly, but it's fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and sometimes it's silly, but silly's not bad. Gosh,
it's not bad.
That culture just messes up all kinds of stuff. I gotta tell you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because I'm awfully silly. I'm a very silly person. And I'm still very smart and know things.
Yeah. You're very silly and very serious. You have whole spectrum.
I'm all over that spectrum. Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. So we're just about at the end. Was there anything else that you wanted to share before we finish, my dear?
Speaking of validating, if there's any experiences that folks have thought of while we've been talking, like related to your own experience of, was that touching into the numinous? Was I connecting with Anima Mundi? I just want to offer, yes, you are. Like you are doing this in small and big ways that are unique to you. And if you are interested in continuing to develop this practice, threading those little experiences together is a brilliant way to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yes. Thank you, Cacky. I appreciate that very much. All those little experiences, all the little synchronicities even.
Yes.
Right? I mean, things that small can be a numinous experience. It doesn't always have to be like, Archangel Michael just presented themselves to me.
Right.
It
It
could
might
just
be.
like, yeah, right. But it doesn't have to always be that. It could be something really small that you're like, oh, interesting, right? Maybe it's 11:11 on your clock. Who knows? But all of those moments matter because they matter to you.
Right.
It's the relationship thread pulling, right? It's the sparkle that makes you. So yeah, I think exactly what you said. It's important to validate those and to give them their due. And I think the more you do that, the easier it is to notice that.
Yeah. Yeah. And, going back to a theme that's come up in many of our conversations of the more that you attend to psyche, the more that you attend to soul, to the Anima Mundi, the more that relationship starts to open up. Just like the more you check in with a friend, the deeper that relationship is likely to grow. Same thing with all of these practices and your access to the numinous. Keep showing up and listening, and they'll start showing up and talking back more.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. That's what I tell everyone when they're like, I don't dream. I'm like, yeah, you do. Let's get you guys in conversation. Yeah. All right. Well, at the end of every show, we always say, like, if there was one thing you wanted everyone to know, what would it be? You just gave a beautiful validation nugget. But if there was anything additional that you would like to add.
Thank you. Thank you, Adrienne, and thank you, folks at home listening, for being open to having this conversation, because not everyone is. And it's a really big and courageous deal to be here with you all. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. That was lovely. So appreciative of you and your time and your talent and your knowledge. We have one more show together, I think, before the end of the year. So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah. So thank you very much. And everyone listening or watching, goodbye. Good night. Have a lovely week.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Energetic Psyche, a podcast that live streams every week, Tuesday evenings at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I hope you'll join us again in the future. Have a great week.